Okay, let's continue on with our problem that we're solving this week. So far, what we have done is we identified our inputs, our outputs, assumptions, put them in logical order. We went ahead and solved, sitting down here, solved our problem, right, for each one of our outputs and displayed so we know we're finished. Yeah, yes. The next thing we do is we determine our variables. Well, we have a base price. A base price is going to be currency. So in this case, it could be either a decimal. And again, I don't want to confuse you because I know we've been going back and forth, or a double. Okay. And so what we're going to say from now on, anything that is money, let's go ahead and make it a double. Okay. That's a decimal, but it's just called a double. We'll explain that a little bit later on in the course, exactly what it is, but we're going to call it a double. And that's what a lot of programmers use for any type of currency. Okay. The next thing we will do is we'll go ahead and do the same thing here, okay? Now we have accessories and finish. What's interesting about this is that they are an input, but are they truly going to be a variable? In this case here, what we could say at this point in time is, well, we either want to say yes or no. Do you want a stereo? Do you want a finish? I'm sorry, do you want stereo? Do you want leather? Do you want navigation? So it's really yes or no. So it's almost like this Boolean thing here, right? If that's confusing you, don't let it at this point in time because I think you're going to see what we're going to do to this in our program, okay? And so these are not, what we're going to do based upon, this week's topic on checkboxes and radio buttons. You can almost sit back and say, well, we're not going to really use these as variables, but we're going to utilize the controls in our particular program because we're probably going to use checkboxes for accessories and radio buttons for a finish. But we'll keep it at this for right now, okay? My AF price, double, whoops, can't spell it, double, tell you what, let's just go ahead and copy and paste this so you don't have to watch me spell it anymore. And this, and then my subtotal will be that, and finally this right here, okay? Get rid of whatever, why that separated, who knows, okay? So all doubles. My next step is scope, correct? So either it's local scope or it's class level scope. So once again, if after we collect this data, base price and trade-in, and we do our calculations and we do everything necessary to it, do we need to keep it after that? Are we ready to release it from memory? If the answer is yes, it'll be local. And that's what it is, okay? Local, okay? Even these, I'm going to show you later on, we're not going to use these as variables, but if we did, they would be local too. Once we display our outputs, in this case here, those would be local also, meaning we can get rid of them once they're displayed. We don't need to keep anything around for the next time. That's what class is all about. Okay? Class is only there if we need to keep it, or we're accumulating, or we're going to use it in multiple procedures. In this case here, there is no reason. Once we display it, we're done. Does that make sense? Okay? If we keep going down our list, our next thing is test cases. We're going to keep test cases to next week, okay? So I don't completely confuse you this week or overwhelm you this week. We've talked about test cases already and what they are, but now that we have conditional programming, they get a little bit more involved. I don't want to say they're confusing, just a little bit more involved. So we'll allow you to play around with what we're doing this week, and then next week we'll talk about test cases a little bit more and make sure you get that down, okay? Because next week's a little bit lighter than what this week is. Okay, with that said, we'll go ahead and say, okay, we got everything. Let's dive into our program. And here you go. Dun, 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 dun. I'm not going to bore you to tears and program this for you. I'm just going to demonstrate and show you what we did as we applied this particular problem. Once again, so I kind of creatively designed this. So this is a prototype. When I tell you or you ever hear the term prototype, this is the GUI, okay? And as you see, so I would probably work with um, my users, my customer, to see how they want this GUI done. So in this case here, we decided to put a base price here and and trade allowance there. And then over here are accessories and finish. Okay, you may have designed this a little bit differently. Really, the answer comes down to what does your customer like? So usually you show this GUI before you ever program it, okay, to your customer and say, do you like it or not? And if not, tell me what you don't like. All right? One thing that I like for all of you to do is make sure everything is lined up, everything's in, when appropriate, put group boxes around things. Make sure there's something in the group boxes. Don't ever have it say group box one or whatever. Okay. All never have form one sitting up here. Always tell me what this is all about, what your program's about. Even right now, if you just want to put the assignment name up there, that's perfectly fine with me. All right. In this case here, everything is lined up. All the inputs and the outputs are lined up, and everything is spelled uh, correctly. Okay. I hate misspelling. It shows cheapness. It shows laziness. It shows, just sloppiness all the way around. Why would I ever want to pay for that? Make sure you do this well. Your buttons should be in one row. You should just have your buttons sitting in the one row, usually toward the end there, okay, or at the bottom. They all should be the same size and spaced evenly, okay, as you go through it. Sometimes I get people that will sit back and have all this space over here. Not sure why there's all this empty space. I feel like I could play soccer or baseball or whatever. Keep it nice and neat and centered, okay? Just have your form as big as you need it, but yet don't introduce a ton of space for no apparent reason. Got it? And above all, no colors. Keep it like this, particularly because, it's easier to see for everybody. That's not you, okay, in this case. Okay, we kind of went through that. So this is how I designed it, right? I used check boxes for my accessories, kind of what we talked about before. I used finish this way. I defaulted to standard for my finish. You may be asking, could I default to the check boxes being checked? And the answer is yes, the same exact way you did this by the property called checked for on the radio button. There's also one for the accessories under the properties piece here. And if for some reason you sit back and say, about 98% of the people always want a stereo. And so if that's the case, why don't we make it easier on them and actually say check to it? And you could if you wanted to, and it would start then with the check in there. Strictly up to you, strictly up to your customer and how they want this whole thing designed. Does that make sense? I'm going to go ahead and say, nope, I really want them to pick this one way or the other, okay? And so what I'm going to do is take that checked off as soon as I quit talking and find it and then make it false again. But hopefully you get that idea, okay? Let's get into our program. So here's my calculate. All right, and here's all the code in there. And so what I did here, let's go through this real fast. I'm going to take my little piece here and tell you what, I'm going to put that there, and I'm going to take my code here and put this here. Okay, once again, I designed my program before we ever got into it, which is great. Okay, this way I know it's done, it's complete. We haven't really tested it very well, but we'll learn how to do that again a little bit next week. But regardless, I've done a lot of work so far, and I don't need to do rework. All I need to do is just relate it over. So in this case here, my local variables, which would be declared within my procedure, in this case, the button click procedure, I'm going to put them there. See, double, double. I'm going to put my outputs, AF price, tax, subtotal, and a total amount due right here as double. It's just basically one for one, people. Hopefully you're starting to get that, okay? Obviously what we're going to do next is go get my inputs. In this case here, I don't need to go get accessories and finish because we're actually going to pull that, and you'll see that here in 1 second. But I do need to get the information off the text boxes and put those into my variables, okay? Just like we have done before. That part's going to change starting next week. We're going to validate finally starting next week. It has been driving you crazy that we were allowed to put bad data into our programs. That all changes next week, okay? So hold on for that, okay? Now look what I'm doing. Look how this works. I'm going to come down here and we're going to do this sound system stuff, right? So sound system, leather, and so on. And basically I called it stereo in this case. But look how I wrote this. Very similar to what I did here. So if, we call this sound system stereo, whatever, if checked stereo dot checked equals true, that's pretty much what I'm saying here. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the checkbox, I'm checking the check property, okay? We kind of introduced that in our design time too. And I'm asking if it's true or not. If it is, I'm going to make my AF price equal to my stereo price. I could have accumulated it, okay? My stereo price, all of these are sitting up here as constants. See them right there? Stereo leather this, pearl custom, and then my tax rate. I think my tax rate is supposed to be 8%, but whatever. All right? Makes sense? Isn't that easy? Isn't that cool? And then look at leather, and then look at nav. Very similar to what I did right here, okay, in this case. And again, if this is confusing to you, I very easily could have put a plus equals right there too. Maybe I'll do that. Don't worry about it too much, okay? All right, so I'm accumulating and kind of going from there, right, as I go through it. What's interesting, I'm accumulating the AF price, but I'm not doing it for every button click. And so once again, that would be a local variable, because once I'm done with all this and I display it, I don't need to do it. I don't need to keep it in my memory. All right, now let's look at how I wrote this right here. Look at this. If rad pearl eyes is checked, then I'm going to accumulate to my AF price the pearl price. Else, if it's not, how about custom? Do you want custom? And if you want that, I'll put 750 in there. Else, nothing. I assume you pick standard. So if you pick the standard one, these two will not be checked, right? Because with the radio buttons, only one can be checked. And so if I pick standard, I can ask this question, but if a standard was picked, it would basically be false in both those cases. Does that make sense? That's how we took this code right here and applied it to this code. Check the radio buttons. Isn't that cool? All right. Everything else, for the most part, there's our tax. And so you see how I did that. Very similar to that. My subtotal, and finally, my total amount due. And then I displayed everything with format currency. Almost word for word, or at least, what do you want to say, very similar to my design versus my program. So if you spend most of your time on your design, writing your program should be fairly easy. And you might be asking the question, well, should I be spending more time on my design than I should my program? And the answer is absolutely 100% yes, you should be. 40% of your time should be spent on design, 20% of your time coding, and 40% of your time testing, okay? And so that's the importance. Do all the upfront work here, solve the problem, and then it's easy to transfer it over to your programming language. Remember, you're not writing VB here. You're writing pseudocode. I should be able to take this design and apply it to any programming language, just not VB, any programming language. So quit writing VB over here. Don't put dot something, dot that, and all that. Don't put properties on there. Don't put Hungarian notation. Keep it simple. Keep it English-like, okay? All right, finally, we sit back and we have our program. It's all working. This is how we relate to it. Pretty darn simple, I think. And let's go ahead and start it, and I'll show you how it all works. And we'll kind of do a test case in the middle of our head here, and we'll sit back and we'll start with a base price of $10,000. Okay, we should have test cases right when we do this, and again, we'll talk about that next week. And if I wanted a stereo, that would be, if I add these three, it was supposed to be $3,000 more. We'll keep this standard, so my accessories and finish should be $3,000. That would make this $13,000. Oh God, I see my sales tax. I think I had 7% in there, so 7% of $13,000. Oh Lordy, see 700 and seven. Oh God, 721. Is that right? I might not be right. I'm off the top of my head, but we'll have something around that $700 time area, and then we'll have our subtotal, which will be these three together. This one, and my tax, and then my trade-in allowance. Let's say they're giving me $1,000 for my old junker, and then my amount due. Let's see how we did. $910. What did I say? 721. I guess I forgot to put the 210. Sorry, math was not, well, I actually majored in math, so I'm actually very good at it, but I didn't do a very good job there, okay? So $910 is the tax of this, but there's the 3,000 because I picked all three of these, and then all the way through, right? If I want to sit back and say I want to know accessories, I just want a custom, I think that's 10,000. So I have a $10,000 base price. This would be 750. Yeah, I'm not going to even try figuring out the sales tax. You kind of get the idea. And oops, what did I hit wrong? Oh, I know what I hit wrong. I didn't put anything in there for trade, and I abnormally ended. Interesting. That's almost enough for me to restart this video and do it all over again. I'm not going to. We will fix that next week so that never happens again. And we ensure that we have some type of data in there, okay? If you didn't follow that, don't worry about it. We will figure it out next week, okay? So once again, custom, I'm not picking any accessories, and then there you go, 750. There's my sales tax. There's my subtotal, and then we'll go from there. Are these numbers right? I think they are, but we really should do test cases to ensure that. And once again, we'll do that next week. The goal of this week was very simple, to introduce you to the conditional structure and apply it for the first time. You're going to be asked to do some assignments. It's going to be similar to this to see if you kind of get the idea and you can apply what we talked about this week along with the new controls and so on. And then again, we're going to keep building each and every week to improve your ability to build logical applications that can get somewhat complex. But if you keep it simple and you do the things we talked about this today, breaking it all down, solving for it before you dive into the program, do one thing at a time, you should be fine. Okay, I wish you good luck this week. Give it a good effort, and hopefully you learned a lot.